to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I are kicking off today by celebrating the fact that the NHL might be back by August.
That would be fantastic. I mean, what a way to celebrate my birthday, right?
There you go. And, they're already talking about canceling college football, so we'll see what happens here. It's gonna be a little pretty interesting. What do you before we jump into our top 10 Buffalo Sabres, give your percentage on the league returning and playing out the rest of this season?
Now, when you say playing out the rest of the season, are you including...
I just mean playoffs, anything. Like,
okay.
Will this season continue, or are they just going to go, hey, we have to cancel it. Sorry. We're going to start the next season at some point.
I'm leaning towards 65% right now at this point.
Of them canceling or playing?
No, of playing. I'm
okay.
sorry. Yeah. Mainly because, so obviously it varies from country to country, right? But I look at a place like Wuhan, China, where the outbreak started, right? And they're starting to get back to a little normalcy. They lifted their whole ban on people being stuck indoors forever and never allowed to go outside. And so gives me a little bit of hope. Maybe that, in a few months we can possibly get things back to normal, but we'll see, obviously.
Yeah. I'm going to say 95% we play this season through.
Beautiful.
I'm really not worried about it. So keep your hopes up. It'll come back. It just might not be as soon as we all had hoped or wanted. Okay, with that said, the Buffalo Sabres are our top 10 team of the day. If you haven't heard the other 26 teams that we've done so far, you can go back and subscribe to the show wherever you subscribe to podcasts, and you can check those out. I'm sure there's a high probability that your favorite team is on that list. So, and if they're not, we'll get to them soon enough. With that said, Buffalo Sabres, we always do a just miss list. And so, Justin, who's on your just missed list?
Yeah, I've got three guys. All three, surprisingly, are in the top 10 all-time points per game for this franchise. Okay. Which, if you really think about it, right, you would have to think maybe one of these guys would have made my top 10, but unfortunately not. So number one, I got Danny Briere, just missing my list. Second guy, Danny Gar. Not sure if that's really how you pronounce it correctly. Boy, yeah.
Danny,
and then
Danny
Gar.
Gar,
yeah. Let's go with Gar. Yeah, why not? And then the last guy on my list, Rene Robert. Spent some time with that famed French Connection line. I'm sorry, not French Connection, but with Dave Anderchuk and Perot.
No, he was on the French Connection.
I'm sorry. Yeah. No, you're right. I'm sorry. Getting things mixed up. So yeah, and Rene Robert just missing for me.
Okay. All right. Well, with my just missed, I have defenseman Craig Ramsey. He misses my list, and then a few guys who were great for this team, but just didn't either have, like Miro Shatan misses my list. Was really good for them during a time when they were fine, but they just weren't that great. So he maybe was the best goal scorer at one time for this Sabres team. Shatan makes my list, and then misses my list. And then Pierre Turgeon and Dale Hawerchuk, two guys that have made other teams' lists. Turgeon averaged over a point per game for this team, as did Dale Hawerchuk, but they missed my list. Just kind of based on the fact that they also are on some other lists, and I think that there are more impactful players with nicer playoff runs or just more important to this franchise as a whole. I don't know if you think of Pierre Turgeon as a Buffalo Sabre. There might be a few other teams you think of him before that. Same with Dale Hawerchuk. Don't think of him as a Sabre, but he did have some real nice years as a Sabre.
Yeah, that's a good list there. I'll tell you what, one name that popped into my head, and I really wanted to put him on this list just because of, I guess you could call it nostalgia, but growing up, my cousin and I, we used to always play NHL video games all the time, and it seems like for whatever reason, he just always wanted to play the Buffalo Sabres so he could have, Satan on his team. And it seemed like no matter what, it was like a cheat code. Satan could go out there and just score out of nowhere, just the flukiest goals. He would always seem to come up with the big goal, and it drove me nuts all the time. Granted, I would still end up beating my cousin in overtime, but still, irritating.
He obviously has a deal with the devil.
Clearly.
Okay, well, let's go to your number 10. Who do you have rounding out your list?
Number 10 for me is Thomas Vanek.
Hey, me too.
All right, yeah. I'll tell you what, this guy he always seemed to be, in my opinion, one of the better goal scorers this franchise has ever had. And, honestly, you could probably put him up there as maybe the greatest Austrian player of all time in the NHL.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But, he's sitting, I think number 6 all time in scoring for the Buffalo Sabres. I might be mistaken. Let me take another peek.
Yeah, he's number 5 all time in goals. Yep.
That's what it is. Yes, thank you.
254 goals, just behind your boy Danny Gagagar.
Yeah. Number 11 in franchise points. This guy he always seemed to just be in the right place at the right time, and he was just like, watching him early on in his career, he was basically like the celebrity, the big star behind, the goaltenders that they had behind him. He was the guy.
Yeah, scored 40 goals twice for this franchise and scored 30 goals a couple other times, and then pretty much scored 20 goals every other year. I had that contract dispute that kind of, I think, soured him a little bit to people. And and he also scored 20 and 38 when there was the lockout year. So that's pretty much golden for another 40-goal year there. But yeah, he's he's kind of floated around. He floated around the league, played for several different teams at the end of his career, but definitely like that second year in the NHL where he had 43 goals, 84 points. He's a plus 47. He was just absolutely ripping it up. And 28 of those goals were scored 5-on-5. So wasn't just a power play monster, could score at any point. I think that what happened to him is that the league just kept getting faster and faster, and he was more that net front presence. He could move earlier in his career, but he slowed down significantly as time went along.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more. And he was a guy too. You talk about hands. When he came to Detroit and I watched him play, right, the speed wasn't there anymore, but his IQ was just through the roof. And he just always seemed to produce. And had a little success with the Red Wings playing with some speedy guys, and unfortunately just sort of faded into the sunset. We never really saw what happened to this guy.
Yeah, I think he just kind of got a little injury prone towards the end there. Okay, so we both had the number 10, same number 10. How about your number 9?
Number 9 for me is a current Buffalo Sabre, Jack Eichel.
Okay, I have him a little bit higher. At number 8 is where I have Jack Eichel, but. Talk to us about Jack Eichel. Why is he at your number 9?
Yeah, I think this kid, he's got stardom written all over him, right? And the MVP potential. So, we've heard it early on in the season when the Sabres were in the thick of the race for the playoffs here. But he was a guy that literally put this team on his back this season. And you see it every year, right? I've watched this kid since he got drafted here, and it just seems every year he gets better and better and better. And, unfortunately, he hasn't really had a lot of talent around him. I know last year he had Jeff Skinner that looked pretty good, and 40 goals, not too shabby, but now it seems like with no consistent coaching, he still manages to succeed and improve his game every year. And I think by the time his career is done, assuming he stays with the Buffalo Sabres for most of his career, I think he'll be right up there, in the top 5 for sure, in terms of points and production and everything else. The kid's he's amazing. He's fast. He's got great hands, can shoot the puck. He can do everything.
Yep, totally agree. It's unfortunate that he doesn't have that 1-2 punch. Even Connor McDavid, who has been on a bad team, has made the playoffs once. He has his sidekick to play alongside of him, Leon Draisaitl. Whereas, Skinner, he had a really nice season last year, and that's kind of the best that Jack Eichel's gotten through his career, through his first 354 games. But he certainly, as the Sabres were in a playoff spot, I think that he was poised for MVP consideration. Now they've fallen too far for him to be considered for that now, but he definitely will be the reason the Sabres make the playoffs one of these days.
Absolutely.
Okay, my number 9 is a goaltender, probably the goalie that I have watched on the Buffalo Sabres the most. Also, that's because he has played the most games for the Buffalo Sabres as their goaltender. Also, leading the franchise in wins and losses is Ryan Miller.
Yeah, my number 8, surprisingly.
Okay, all right. So we just flipped a couple guys. Ryan Miller during it was like 2006 when the Buffalo Sabres were just like that 2006, 2006-07, that time frame. I think that team could have won the cup, especially in 2006. That was an extremely good team. They lost out to the Carolina Hurricanes there in the conference finals, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that team could have won the Stanley Cup had things gone their way, but ultimately they never win a cup with Ryan Miller. They had some phenomenal teams, but Ryan Miller was considered top 5 goalie at least in the NHL for a few years there. So never took home the hardware.
No, he did take home a Vezina, actually.
Oh, he did have a Vezina. Oh, yeah, that's right.
In 09-10 season, he had 41 wins, 929 save percentage, only 5 shutouts, surprisingly.
Wow, how did I completely forget about that? My research team is just, I'm going to fire them, you know.
But
I'm trying to keep them. I'm trying to keep them on to give them jobs, you know.
Well, that's respectful, I guess.
Someone's going to message me asking if they can be a part of our research team and how much I pay.
I hope so.
I pay in free swag.
There you go.
I'll send you a sticker.
That year he won the Vezina, though. Doubled his best goals saved above average at 36 goals saved above average that year, which just crazy number.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. It's it's just too bad that after such good playoff runs earlier that they go miss the playoffs in 08, and then they lose in the first round the year he wins the Vezina. They lose in the first round the following year. He just could never. St. Louis trades for him the year after the lockout. They lose in the first round. You know, they just could never. He never found playoff success after that conference final run. But that's he did have some good international success. Won the silver in Vancouver in 2010. But yeah, other than that, there's Ryan Miller though, number 9 for the Buffalo Sabres for me, number 8 for you. With that said, on to number 7.
Yeah, for me, number 7 got to be one of the longest drought. Basically took the longest to get his cup, and that's Dave Andreychuk. Okay,
yeah, I have him quite a bit higher for this team, but
yeah. So for me, I guess you look at the production, right? 6th all-time in scoring, or I'm sorry, 2nd all-time in scoring,
yeah.
6th all-time in games played, 3rd all-time in goals. For a guy that basically, I think, had the good fortunes of playing on such a great line, for so long in Buffalo, but never really had a lot of success in the playoffs, and of course had to move on to greener pastures and gave a swing at the cup with Toronto, New Jersey, and then finally has success with Tampa Bay.
Yeah, as their captain, no doubt.
Yeah.
And in a year, he retired the year after they won the cup, right? Like that was the lockout happened. There was no season the next year, but so he ends up, that's his last game, is winning the cup as the captain of the Lightning. That year, he's 41 years old when they win the. 41. Oh no, he did actually come back and play the year after the lockout. He played 42 games that next year.
Yeah, that's right.
But anyways, so he's 41 years old when they win the cup, and he goes and has 14 points in 23 games in the playoffs. Granted, only 1 goal, but he still had a really nice playoff for a guy. It was kind of like okay, he's a third line guy in the playoffs. To get 14 points is impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he did average 18 minutes a game there, and you got to think, right? So obviously with Tampa, you had your top line with, Brad Richards, LeCavalier, and St. Louis, but he wasn't too shabby for some secondary scoring on a team like that.
Yeah, Dave Andreychuk, just such a dominant force in front of the net. Maybe other than like you think back, all right, some dominant net front presence. I always go back to Dino Ciccarelli, long time forgotten about, but he was just the absolute man in front of the net. But Dave Andreychuk just quietly goes about his business. Overall, his career, he's got 640 goals. And I believe the most... I think Ovechkin passed him for power play goals.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
But second... and that record for power play goals was held for a good long time, like 15 years, which is a pretty long time. But 274 power play goals was just an absolute dominant force. You couldn't move him in front of the net, and that was really the key to his success. Yes, the Sabres didn't have the same type of playoff success, but they made the playoffs almost every single year that he was there, other than his very last year. But that year he was ultimately dealt to the Leafs. But they just came up against always better teams in those playoffs. But I don't think that it was Andreychuk who was the problem. As you see, he's got 6 points in 5 games, 6 points in 6 games, 7 points in 6 games. Like, he always was doing well in the playoffs. It definitely wasn't, Dave Andreychuk's not living up to his regular season success, therefore we lost. I think that it was more their team really actually wasn't that great. But so I have him up a little bit higher, and you'll find out where. But my number 7. My number 7 is a guy he's a little bit a little further down the all-time list. He's at number 17, but my number 7 is Pat LaFontaine, who has the highest points per game in this franchise's history at 1.437, 385 points in 268 games. Unfortunately, his career cut short because of concussions, but he comes from the Islanders to the Sabres and has their best offensive year ever, with 53 goals, 95 assists, and 148 points. Probably no Sabre will beat that, at least anytime soon. I don't know. There hasn't been too many 148 point seasons since then, just in general, let alone for the Sabres. So that also his best career year, playing all 84 games. That year there were 84 games, and then get this, he never, the next year he plays 16, then he plays 22, 76, 13, and 67, and that was it.
Wow, yeah, those 148 points too, highest single season mark by any American-born player, so not too shabby.
Yeah, and they go and they make the playoffs that year, and in 7 games, he has 12 points. And they still lose in 7. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's irritating.
All right, let's go number 6.
Number 6 for me, a defenseman, only defenseman on this list for me, and a guy who probably maybe you'll say for now is the best defenseman to ever play on this team, but that might be different in the next decade.
Rasmus.
That's Phil Housley for me.
Okay.
Great American-born defenseman, probably one of the better American-born defensemen to ever play the game. We look at the stats here, and playing for the Buffalo Sabres, had some pretty nice numbers, especially for a defenseman. I mean, in 608 games played, 558 points. Not too freaking shabby.
Not at all.
Always a consideration for the Norris. His best year, unfortunately, came with Winnipeg when he finished 3rd in the Norris Trophy voting, but never really brought home the hardware. Unfortunately, finished second his rookie season too in Calder voting, but other than that, he never really had the hardware. Always better defensemen out there. Your Paul Coffeys, your Bobby Orrs, and Ray Borks, and that sort of those guys in front of him all the time. But he never ceased to put up the numbers, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, he probably got snubbed a little bit being in Buffalo as compared to some other cities. Also did very well with the Calgary Flames, I believe.
Yep, absolutely.
But yeah, that's he moved around quite a bit. It was kind of after he left the Sabres. He's there for 8 years, and goes all over the freaking place.
8 different teams.
I remember when he got traded to the Maple Leafs, and then he played one freaking game and got hurt. It's like, the Leafs always, for the longest time, it was like they'd get these players right at the end of their careers. Eric Lindros, Phil Housley. Who was the defenseman on Glenn Wesley? Like, they would just get these guys right at the end of their career. Brian Leach went to the Leafs for a minute. And Owen Nolan went there for a second. And it just never panned out. It was like the name comes to the Leafs and then their career's over. Okay, my number 6 is a guy who was on the French Connection line, probably the least, I guess, in terms of talent. Rene Robert, probably the guy who was the third best. Might have been the Brendan Morrison of the line, if you remember Morrison, Bertuzzi, and Naslund on the Vancouver Canucks about 20 years ago. There was probably the Brendan Morrison of the line, but nevertheless, 552 points in 524 games, scored 222 goals, and was still an integral part of that team. Did get a second team All-Star vote in the 80 or 74-75 season. Put up 100 points that year, and anyone putting up 100 points for the Sabres is going to get some consideration for this list. But played almost his entire career for the Buffalo Sabres. Played some years for Toronto and kind of bounced around towards the end of his career, as a lot of guys do. But Rene Robert definitely made that French connection line possible. So, that line is the greatest line in Buffalo Sabres history, no doubt. It also probably you'd put it on the top 10 lines of all time. For how long those guys played together and the kind of production that they all put up, I think that you'd have to. Good luck finding too many lines that actually played together the vast majority of the time that produced the same way that the French Connection line did. So Rene Robert gets mine, number 6.
All right, yeah, can't argue with it. He unfortunately makes my just missed. He's a guy that, even though he's a great goal scorer, I just think he, maybe benefited a little bit from the guys that he got to play with. Obviously,
100% he benefited from those guys. I just like his jersey is in the rafters for the Sabres. Yeah. It's hard for me to leave a guy off a list unless you're on the Montreal Canadiens and your jersey's in the rafters.
I respect it. Hey, I can't argue with it. So,
all right, let's go. You're number 5.
Yeah, number 5 for me, a Russian-born player, took the league by storm, defecting from the Soviet Union, comes over to Buffalo, and just has one of the greatest goal-scoring seasons ever in 92-93. That's Alexander Mogilny. We know what he did in 92-93, putting up 76 goals, 127 points. I mean, he came over and just changed the game. And I think probably one of the, I don't want to say, underappreciated Buffalo Sabres of all time, but he might be up there in terms of guys that maybe didn't get as much, didn't get their due as much as other guys on the Sabres.
Yeah, and scored 76 goals in his rookie season. That's ridiculous. Also, I've made a grave error, and I don't know how he's not on my list, but I was like, I'm going to put Alexander Mogilny somewhere, and I had filled out the list and then just forgot to put him in there. So, guess I'm just going to bump everybody down one. Now I'll just leave him off my list. It's all right.
Hey, I left Rene Robert off the list, so there you go.
There it is.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, you look at McGillney gets to play with Pat LaFontaine and Dave Anderchuk, and to me, I think, Dave Anderchuk definitely benefited, I think, more than, anybody on that line from playing with the other two, which is why he's a little bit lower on my list. But, man, McGillney just he had come over and he had hands and speed to burn, and he had just one of the more talented players, I think, at the time on the planet, and just was tremendous playing with LaFontaine and Anderchuk.
Yeah, 127-point season definitely does not hurt anybody. Crazy, 76 goals. It's crazy that he had 76 goals. He scored 55 another year, but really, he only scored 40 one other time. Kind of an all over the place type of player.
Yeah.
Just, for whatever reason, didn't find that level of goal scoring ever again. But
yeah, a little sad he moved on to Vancouver too, because you look at the team when they acquired another guy that's going to show up on both of our lists, I'm hoping, Dominik Hasek, and what they were able to do, in the late 90s. And you think if they had a guy like Alexander Mogilny still, what they could have done.
Yeah, his tenure in Vancouver, his first year, he had 55 goals and 107 points. I do remember, once you got into those years where the Marc Messier comes over to the Canucks, and he was expected to kind of turn the franchise around and just didn't. And for whatever reason, McGillney I don't think he was happy there, from what I remember. And then, of course, he gets dealt at the deadline from the Canucks to the Devils, and goes and wins the Stanley Cup with the Devils in 2000, and isn't really the huge impact player I think that they thought that they were getting. Ends up with 7 points in 23 games in the playoffs. But the following year, he has 16 points in 25 games. Of course, they end up losing to who was 2001? 2000. Did they win the Cup in 2001? No. 2001 they win the Cup.
Yeah, the 2000 were the Dallas Stars.
No, that was 99.
I'm sorry, yeah.
99, 2000s of the Devils, 2001 is the Avalanche. Yeah, they lose to the Avalanche. Okay, yeah. Because then the Wings win the Cup the following year.
And 02.
He actually was very good for the Leafs, too, when they were acquired. He was kind of that, he's going to be Matt Sundin's missing winger. And they really just never found the same kind of connection, I think, that people thought that they would find. But nevertheless, McGillney should be on my list. He's not, but that's okay. We're just going to leave him off because, it's what he gets. If you don't have two 70-goal seasons, I'm not going to have you on my list.
Hey, high standards here, buddy.
Right. Okay, so my number 5 is the second portion of the left side of the French Connection line, and that is Rick Martin. Rick Martin was on the first All-Star team twice and the second All-Star team 2 times. Was second in Calder voting his rookie season. Just consistently putting up high 80s, 90s, 60s, just always putting up big point totals. Never could stay fully healthy, and I think that was some of his maybe some of his problem, but does end his career with Buffalo with 382 goals, good for second all time. And obviously everyone benefited from playing with Gilbert Perreault, but Rick Martin was the goal scorer of that line. Was that high scoring winger, and he's wouldn't be possible without Rick Martin. Unfortunately, for their playoff runs, he did have a couple really nice years in 94, 95. Of course, they come up against the Philadelphia Flyers, and nobody was beating the Flyers. But he had 15 points in 17 games, and the following year, 11 points in 9 games. Always played very well in the playoffs. So there's that as well.
All right. Don't hate it.
Your number 4.
Number 4 for me, probably one of the more talented American-born players ever.
Dave Andreychuk?
Leads this franchise in points per game, and that is Pat LaFontaine.
Okay, all right. You've got him up there.
Yeah, I've got him at number 4, mostly because this guy comes in. Obviously he was making a huge impact on and off the ice for this franchise. But I mean, he comes in his very first season and puts up 93 points in 57 games, along with 46 goals. Insane, and follows it up in 92-93 with 148 points in 84 games. I mean, this was a team that was starting to kind of, I don't want to say fade out, but they weren't really competing that well. I mean, yes, they did make the playoffs, but they were always out in the first round. Comes over from the Islanders, who, he had a ton of success with, and you think, okay, this guy's going to turn this franchise around, and just really never was able to do so. Ended up leaving in 97 for the Rangers and ultimately had to retire, but a little too young. But yeah, for me, number 4 is Pat LaFontaine.
Okay. My number 4, we've talked about him at length. Dave Andreychuk, my number 4. I think that he's second all-time in scoring by far, 804 points in 37 games. So not only does he have the longevity with this team, he also has put up huge numbers and consistently over time. So Dave Andreychuk slides into the number 4. And with that, we go to our top 3, which I know chances are there'll be 2 of the same, but I know that one of them is going to be different. So who's your number 3?
Number 3 is Rick Martin for me.
Okay, so you've got him a little higher.
Yeah, we've talked about him, second all-time in goals for this franchise. Part of that famed French Connection line. I mean, he was just ridiculous when he paplayed for 10 different seasons.
All right.
And, of course, numbers in the rafters, too, which doesn't hurt.
That's absolutely numbers in the rafters. There are, funny enough, Danny Gare, his number is actually in the rafters. He missed our list. And then do you know there's one other guy who's going to miss our list that is in the rafters for the Sabres. Do you know who it is?
Ooh, no, not off the top of my head.
I'm gonna give you a minute to think. Think through defensemen that have played for the Buffalo Sabres. And it'll maybe come to you.
I should know this. It's on the tip of my tongue.
My number 3 is actually Phil Housley. I feel like he's the best defenseman to ever play for this franchise, and as such, he has the most points. He has the most goals. It's not even close. Nobody has over. The second highest is 73. He's got 178. He's 558 points to Mike Ramsey's 329. Nobody is probably going to touch his numbers. Even Rasmus Dahlin, I don't know if he'll end up touching Phil Housley's numbers. But not just a good offensive defenseman, but he was a good all-around guy. He could move the puck extremely well and could skate. Probably would have, like if he had played for the Edmonton Oilers, probably would have been as well known as Paul Coffey had he been with some extremely talented players. Unfortunately, he was stuck in Buffalo in the 80s. So that's just how the cookie crumbles, I guess. And with that said, let's go number 2. I'm curious to see who you put here.
Yeah, I put Gilbert Perreault.
Oh, okay. So I have Gilbert Perreault at number 1.
Okay.
I'm surprised. I'm not surprised because of what I know about you and your love for goaltenders. But Gilbert Perreault, 1,326 points in 1,191 games. The only player to score 400 for this team, actually has 512 goals. Gilbert Perreault, definitely the best skater to ever play for this team in terms of forwards and defensemen. Just unbelievable. Was probably maybe the best skater outside of Guy Lafleur during his time. But of course, he plays for the Buffalo Sabres, so he doesn't get the same type of recognition as a guy who's winning Stanley Cups, since Gilbert Perreault did none of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with putting him at number 1 if that's the way you want to go. I mean, he was a lifetime Sabre. He's got the number in the rafters. Unfortunately, outside of the Calder, not much hardware to go with it.
Yeah, but that's not his fault.
No, of course not. It's not his fault. He went out there and
103 points in 90 playoff games too.
Yeah, that's That's freaking good.
In 79-80, he put up 21 points in 14 games. Had 10 goals in 14 games in the playoffs.
Yeah, but I will say, so the one thing that definitely gave me the nod, apart from being a goaltender, when you look at the best player in the league, Dominik Hasek as a goaltender managed to capture the Hart Trophy twice in a row. Ridiculous.
Yes. He is the when I just remember watching him and thinking this guy looks like he's the luckiest person to ever play the game. But he knew what he was doing. It was crazy. No one's been able to emulate it either. It's not like, Patrick Waugh comes into the league and is dominant and people go, wow, he's got a new style. Let's take his style and use it. Other guys tried to be like Hasek and it didn't work. No one could be like Hasek.
No, they called him the human slinky for a reason. I mean, you look at the numbers. This guy came into Buffalo, leaving Chicago in his first full season in 93-94, a .930 save percentage. Next season, a .930, .920, .930, .932, .937. Absolutely ridiculous. I don't know if we'll ever see that kind of dominance in the goaltender position again in Buffalo Sabres history.
Yeah, and the fact that he takes them to the Stanley Cup Finals basically by himself.
Yeah.
Like a .939 save percentage in the playoffs over the course of 19 games. And I mean, also the fact you're looking at 19 games and they lost in 6 games in the finals.
Just ridiculous.
I mean, he's incredibly, incredibly dominant. They swept or beat teams in 5 games leading up to that. They were just, no one could score on him.
No.
In 19 games, he let in 38 goals. It's
ridiculous.
That's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, so obviously he's your number one.
Yep.
And yes, I would agree. Definitely by far the most hardware. My one thing is Gilbert Perreault just played so many games for this team, put up so many points, and I don't know. It's such a toss-up, but it's kind of that goaltender versus a skater. I guess also we've seen Hasek. Like, I've actually seen him play, of course, over the course of my lifetime. Saw him play a lot of games, saw him destroy my team many times. And also the fact that his very last season, when he's 43 years old, he goes and wins the Jennings Trophy as well. Just outrageous. But
yeah, I will say too, man, you want to talk about a guy that the home run in terms of draft picks? Perreault, first ever draft pick by the Sabres at number 1 overall, and boy, that was a good one.
Hey, yep, that one and Patrick Stepan, 2 great first draft picks.
There you go.
All right, and you can go look up Patrick Stepan if you want for the Atlanta Thrashers. I think that was their pick in '99. Great pick. Also, highly known, little known fact is that he's the one who misses the empty net coming down for the Dallas Stars, and then the Oilers turn around and score. That's Patrick Stepan. That pretty much sums up his career. So, all right, well, that's our Buffalo Sabres top 10. Let us know what you thought at OT Hockey Talk on Twitter and Instagram, and we will talk to you very soon. I think our next team is going to be. We only have 4 left after this one. I think maybe our next team should be the New Jersey Devils.
Oh, okay.
That's a good team to roll to next. So we'll stay in the Eastern Conference. Go to the New Jersey Devils next time, and we will. Our next show is going to be awards. The awards if the season were to end today, so look out for that as well. We will talk to you guys later.